we want to straight away dive in to our conversation with Sarah. So I want to tell you a little bit about Sarah McIntyre. So everyone who has kids in the UK is familiar with Sarah McIntyre's books, with fun and engaging adventure stories and lively, captivating illustrations. She writes and illustrates picture books and comics, and she has completed 32 books so far, which is no mean feat. Amazing. So her works have won awards, including the Leeds Graphic Novel Award, the Sheffield Children's Book Award, the UK LA Award, the Independent Bookshop Week Book Award, and the Bishop Stortford Picture Book Award. You can find out more about her and about the business of children's writing on her website and her blog. And that is www.jabberworks, that's JABBERWORKS.co.uk. Please join me in welcoming the wonderfully talented and very helpful author and illustrator, Sarah McIntyre.
Oh, thank you so much, Lola. I appreciate it. It's great to be here. And yeah, I hope I can sort of give you guys tips and some things, you know, to think about. So yeah, do be saving up for the end of the talk just to ask questions, put them in the chat box, all that kind of stuff. And maybe put this on gallery view so you can see everyone, or I don't know, we'll see. So let's see. Is there any way you could put me on the big screen, then I can show bits to people? I'm trying to think of how to do that. If I could pin myself or something. There we go. Okay. So anyway, you might say, who is this person? This is Sarah McIntyre. So I was born in America. I'm from Seattle, and I didn't study illustration. I studied Russian literature as my first things to study, and I really loved it. I liked reading Russian lit, and then I ended up studying in Moscow for 2 years to do language stuff, and really fell in love with the artwork I saw there in the museums and in the books and things. And so so that kind of put a thought in my head, and I didn't think I would be an illustrator because I never thought I could make a living at it. But I sort of thought maybe I'd be a translator or a teacher or a journalist, or who knows. I went and worked at the Moscow Times for a while, a newspaper. And I ended up marrying somebody I met in Moscow, an English guy who had a flat in London. So we came back here, and I wasn't quite sure what I was doing. I sort of eventually started volunteering in an art gallery and ended up running it with some friends. And that gave me kind of an insight into the fine art world, but it wasn't really my niche. Like, it was quite theoretical, and it wasn't much about pictures. It was all about concepts. And I really I'm all into like maximalism. If you can see, if this is my studio in London, and it's not a minimalist space at all. And everything was minimalist in fine art when I was in it. And it was just like, I want to see things. So yeah, so that was a little bit strange. And eventually I started going to night classes in children's book illustration. And I thought, maybe this is something I could do. And I started to read more children's books in the shops and do sketches and go to book events at a thing very much like this organization, the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators. And eventually I started trying things out. And I did go back at the age of 30 to art college and did a 1-year degree over 2 years. So I could learn a bit more about illustration and specifically. But you know, all the stuff that came before it was really useful. I sort of saw people going straight into illustration from school, and they kind of didn't know what to say. Like, they didn't have their stories yet. And I think it's really good if you can like study something else and kind of develop other interests than just books and just making books, because then you'll have something to tap into. And I think that really helped. Some of the best students that came out of our art college were actually the older students who had other jobs and done other things first. So don't worry if you're a bit older, like, it doesn't matter. You can start young, but you can start much older too. And it tends to be a job that people don't retire from, because it's what you do in your spare time anyway. So yeah, that's the whole thing. I thought I would start by reading just the beginning of one of my books to you, Grumpy Corn, and talking a little bit about how I made it, the process, and then more about kind of inspiration, getting ideas, the actual process of how you make a book, a picture book. And yeah, just be thinking of anything you want to ask and making notes of it in the chat box or at the end. So this is Grumpycorn, very shiny. And here you can see he's rowing out to a cottage on stilts in the water. So maybe put this on big screen so it's speaker view and Zoom, and then you can see the pages really big. And here he is, he's tying up his boat. And you can see I'm really influenced by fabric patterns, like especially Ankara fabrics. I really love the kind of sort of wax print look. It's really beautiful. Unicorn was sitting in his special writing house. I am going to write the most fabulous story in the world, he thought. This made him feel very pleased with himself. He already liked being a writer. You can see he's got his notebook and his pens and his post-it notes, his inspirational posters, even a little ukulele in case he wants to sort of have some musical inspiration. It's all there. Very happy. But Unicorn didn't know where to begin his story. Don't know if this has ever happened to you. I need my special fluffy pen, he said. He went and got his special fluffy pen, but he didn't know what to write. I need a cup of my special moonberry tea, he said. Then I will be able to write my story. He went and made himself a cup of his special moonberry tea. And Unicorn sat at his desk, wondering what to write in his special fancy notebook. He sighed. I wish an idea would come knocking at my door. But Narwhal knocked instead. What are you doing, Unicorn? I am busy writing the most fabulous story in the world, said Unicorn. Wow, said Narwhal. Can I be in your story? And there you can see he's got lots of ideas for the story about jellyfish and octopuses and saving a princess and all that stuff. Don't be silly, said Unicorn. No one wants to read a story about a narwhal. Narwhals are very boring. There will be no narwhals in this story. Oh, said Narwhal. He swam sadly away. Mermaid, guess what, said Narwhal. Unicorn is writing the most fabulous story in the world. Mermaid looked impressed. She swam off to visit Unicorn. Hello, Unicorn, she said. How is your story coming along? Very badly, said Unicorn. I am waiting for my moment of genius. And I do not have any cookies. My genius ideas will only come to me if I can get some cookies to eat. Mermaid had an idea. If I bake you cookies, can I be in your story? Say she's got lots of ideas. Unicorn thought for a moment. Maybe, but only if the cookies make me feel inspired. Mermaid swam back to her submarine to bake her famous starfish cookies. Narwhal helped. He loved licking the bowl. Mermaid brought the cookies to Unicorn. Now can I be in your story? She asked. See, Narwhal looked so excited for him. Unicorn took a bite of cookie and looked thoughtful. He ate the whole plate of cookies and kept looking thoughtful. No, said Unicorn. I'm afraid you can't be in my story. They were very good cookies, but they did not inspire me. Poor Mermaid. Mermaid swam off in a huff. What's wrong, Mermaid? Asked Jellyfish. Unicorn is writing the most fabulous story in the world, she sniffed, but he won't let me be in it. My cookies were not inspiring enough. Maybe I'm in it, said Jellyfish. Everyone loves jellyfish. She wriggled with excitement and swam off to visit Unicorn. Hello, Unicorn, said Jellyfish. Have you finished your fabulous story yet? I can't wait to read it. Is there a jellyfish in it? Why don't you let me be in your story? I will be the most brave jellyfish and go into space and discover fantastic alien jellyfish. And no, howled Unicorn. I can't get any ideas because everyone keeps bothering me. You're all very silly and annoying, and I don't want to write this story anymore. Oh, what a grumpycorn, said Jellyfish. Unicorn threw his fluffy pen, his notebook, and his teacup into the sea. They sank down and drifted on the ocean currents until, look, said Mermaid, it's the most fabulous story in the world. Yippee, let's read it, said Narwhal. Friends gathered around to read Unicorn's story, but Unicorn had not written a single word. Poor Unicorn, said Mermaid. I wish we could help. I have an idea, said Narwhal. Once upon a time, a unicorn tried to write the most fabulous story in the world. He was visited by a world-famous baker, said Mermaid. And the bravest jellyfish in the ocean, said Jellyfish. And the cleverest narwhal in the whole universe, agreed Narwhal. A few hours later, Unicorn arrived carrying a big flat box. I tried to write a fabulous story, he said, but I was not a very fabulous friend. But I am fabulous at ordering pizza. I brought this to say I'm sorry. That looks like a very inspiring pizza, said Narwhal, and you are just in time to help us finish the most amazing, clever, fabulous, and funny story in the world. And there you can see them all tucked up in Mermaid Submarine. And the very last picture, you might notice those little seahorses that appear through the story. They've actually found the book and they're reading it and they're like acting it out like actors on the stage underneath the dock where the stilts of his writing cottage. So that is Grumpy Corn. And I think it's actually really relevant to making books because a lot of people, they like the idea of being a writer. They think it's great. They sort of spend all their time on social media posting pictures of their nicest teacup and like their writing journal. And they think if they just get the right set of rules from a famous writer, they can do it. And so they go to lots of like inspirational talks. But actually, that's not being a writer. Being a writer is just literally putting your pencil and your paper together and writing. And sometimes it's better to write rubbish than to try to write something good. Because at least when you're writing rubbish, you're writing, and that makes you a writer. And you're going to be a bad writer maybe at first, but you get better. And every time, and if you keep writing rubbish, eventually the rubbish is a little bit less rubbish, a little less, and then it might even be good. And then it can be really great, but you'll never get there unless you write a lot of rubbish. So a lot of time people say to me, they say, Sarah, what's your secret for making books? Is it to like write a lot, go to events? It's just make books, make lots of books. Little books, big books, anything. And this was actually inspired by not having an idea because I was just finishing another book and I had to turn in a manuscript for this as soon as I got back from visiting my parents on holiday. And I was panicking because I didn't have an idea for the next story. And I thought, okay, I'm going on an airplane trip to visit my family in America. It's like 10 hours. I'll have loads of time. So I took my special writing notebook and my fancy pen and I packed them in my bag. But I accidentally packed them in the bag that I checked instead of my hand luggage. So when I got on the plane, I didn't actually have even my writing notebook. And so I was really scuppered and I thought, oh no, what do I do? So I got out my phone and I started typing on my phone. And I thought, once I just started writing because I needed to write. So I said, once upon a time, Sarah McIntyre wanted to write a story, but she had no idea what to write. And then I thought, okay, what if I was a unicorn? Everyone likes unicorns. That'd be kind of fun. So once upon a time, a unicorn wanted to write a story but had no idea what to write. And then I got to this place in Alaska where they had a lot of these cottages on stilts in the water. And my friend Felisa, she has a studio there. And it's amazing. I thought this would be like the perfect place to write a children's book. But I was so busy, I didn't even have time to write while I was there because there were so many like distractions and interesting things going on. And she had all these like otters would swim up to the studio and visit, and amazing seagulls and eagles and things. And my brain started putting them together, and I thought, what if I was trying to write a book here, but I kept getting distracted by all these visitors, these from the sea. And I thought, this is a story, because a lot of people can relate to writer's block. And a lot of times with picture books, you have to sell it on two levels. Like the kids have to want it, but also the parents have to buy it. So you need to appeal to both. And usually I go straight for the kids. Like I do books such as Dinosaur Firefighters. And this is just written totally with the kids in mind. Because I think, kids love dinosaurs. They like firefighters. Combine the two, that'll be fun. But with Grumpy Corn, it was a little bit more based at sort of people who also might want to do a children's book, and there's a lot of them. So that was like the double kind of thing where it's for kids and for grown-ups. And this has actually been one of my most popular picture books, even though I think this is just as valuable, but I think the grown-ups go for this one. So that's kind of interesting to note. I also do other books. I like to work with friends. And one of the things that got me into publishing generally was the comics scene. because I wasn't quite sure what I was doing. I was trying to do pictures for my portfolio and writing little bits, but I didn't really know what to do. And making books was the best thing that ever happened. I started making like just these kind of little books. And I always say to kids when I do talks, I always say the difference between a writer and a wannabe writer is the wannabe writer has started lots of stories, but the writer has actually finished them. So the secret to finishing books is making them really, really short. So you can literally just take a piece of paper, which is not a book, fold it, and suddenly you've got a book. You've got the front cover, back cover, and room inside for your story. And if you finish a book that short, you're an author. Whereas if you start a 200-page graphic novel that never gets finished, you're not an author, you're a wannabe author. So it's just about finishing. And that's the great thing about little books, is they don't even have to be good. You just start one. Sometimes you can do it in a day. And this one I did with sort of turnips. I cut up pictures out of turnips and stamped them. And it's a takeoff on the story of the amazing turnip. And it's not even that good. It's just kind of a rough book that I did a long time ago. And I colored it, I photocopied it, and then I colored a bit with watercolor. And here's another one I did. This one, the challenge I set myself was to do it on one piece of paper. So this is actually an origami kind of style folded A3 sheet of paper. And so I could actually print lots of copies of it, just scan it and print it and then fold it and sell copies like that. And I mean, you can do it different ways. It doesn't have to be origami, but that's another way to make like a little book, because making books is so important. This is the very first book I ever made when I was 5. And my mother put it in nice binding with cloth and saved it for me. And I think it's really important when kids make books to show that they're special. So if a kid makes a book, don't just kind of chuck it in the bin or put it in a desk or something. Actually, treat it as something valuable, and maybe you put a cover on it or display it. So this was my fish. And I remember being really frustrated because the art supplies, the crayons were really fat and I couldn't get the detail I wanted. But, I made a book, and I was so proud of that. So it's all about my fish and how it died. So it's quite tragic, but it's okay because I had another fish, I said. And then my mom flushes it down the toilet after it's dead. So that's my very first book. I was very excited by that. So another way to get inspiration is one way is just start writing. It doesn't have to be good, just write. And then gradually you might start adding things that turns it into a better story. Another way is to play a game. And I've done this with my friend David O'Connell. We set out to make a 24-page comic. And let's see, where is it? We said, I said I would do one page. We were going to call it Jampires. We thought the word Jampires. And we thought, what if there were these little vampire characters that sucked the jam out of jam donuts? And then, so if you get a dry donut, it's because it's been sucked dry by the Jampires. That's the reason. So that was all we kind of knew, was Jampires, and that was it. And then, so I did the first page like that, and I emailed it to Dave. And then Dave did the second page and emailed it to me. And then we just went back and forth, but we never discussed it, what was going to happen. So it was like a game of consequences. And Dave is really different to me. He's got a PhD in science, and he's a total brainiac, and very sort of, his brain just works different. So it always surprised me what he would come up with. And so we came up with the whole story that way. And that was really fun. I was so excited to check my email and see what David sent for the next installment. And you can do that with a friend. You can do it with a kid. It's called a comic jam, like a jam session that you have in music, but it's with comics. Or you can do it with like a picture book format. But it's good to set the parameters. We said to each other, you were not allowed to spend more than 1 hour on each page, because otherwise we'd get too precious with it and it wouldn't happen. So we set very limited, 24 pages, 1 hour a page, and that was it. And then we took this to a publisher. And Dave said somebody led the Curtis Brown writing course. We do a course about it together. So I took it to a publisher and we said, do you want to publish this comic? And the publisher was like, I love, that's a great concept, but can I turn it into a picture book? And we were like, okay, which was good and bad. It was good that we got the contract, but bad in the sense that we ended up completely changing the story. We ended up having to write it 18 times from scratch. So the final book, Jampires, has absolutely nothing to do except the concept with the comic. It's very much, it's a different world pretty much. But it was really fun to do because it gave us a lot more scope for color. So here you can see the big jam pot in the sky. And I did this digitally with pencils and different layers in Photoshop. And the way it worked is Dave and I would just take turns writing each draft, because it was both of our project. And he did the pencil roughs, so the sketchy version of it. And then I did the final artwork on top of his pencil roughs. So we're very much co-authors. And you can see there's our names together. And actually, when I was drafting out the cover, I put Dave's name first, just to be polite. But then the designer put my name first, which is kind of random. But the problem with that is that often I'm the only one who gets credit for this book, because people assume I'm the writer and Dave's the illustrator. And it's not. We both wrote it and we both illustrated it. So poor Dave, he's always getting cut out. And they always say, Sarah McIntyre's Jampires. And I'm like, no, Dave's awesome. Like, what are you doing? And that just raises another point, that even if Dave had been the illustrator, this book is all about pictures. Like, the pictures tell a story. So he should totally be credited, even if he's not just the illustrator. The illustrator is a huge part of making picture books, and equal or more than the writer in the actual process. So whenever you talk about picture book, always make sure to mention the illustrator as well as the writer. And it'll make, if you're a writer and you're giving credit to your illustrator, it'll make the illustrator so much more loyal to you and just glad, and they'll be more likely to promote you. And it's a kind of mutual thing. It's really, really useful. You actually gain more from it than even the illustrator possibly. They get more work from it, but you also look generous and you look tuned into the illustration world. And other illustrators see it and go, I want to work with that author, because they're really good at crediting the illustrator. So always credit your illustrator. That's a huge tip. And I've got a campaign called Pictures Mean Business. If you're ever on sort of Twitter, it's hashtag Pictures Mean Business. And it's just saying that pictures are a huge part of, especially picture books, but all illustration. So credit the illustrator. Let's see. Also, I was going to talk a little bit about how I make picture books. So when I did Grumpy Corn, I started out first with just the text on my phone, and then I did a single picture that I turned the text in, the manuscript, to my editor. So that was the picture I drew. I think I drew that on the plane too. And there's Unicorn is Writing Cottage, and that just gave her the overall concept of how it would look. So that was really important. And then I did some sketches of the characters. There's the manuscript with some scribbles on it. And the characters, trying to figure out what they would look like. And then this is actually the second book. I did 2 Grumpy Corn books because I got a second one. I couldn't find the thumbnails for this, but this is the second. So with this one, here's the thumbnail versions. And I just mocked these up, like how it would look in the book. And this is actually one of the probably best tips you'll ever get as an illustrator or a writer, is that when you're doing a picture book, it's all about the format. There's a way of cutting paper that makes 32 pages the ultimate way to not waste paper when they're doing a book. So this is the format. So basically you have covers, the end papers that stick down the book, and then like 12 different spreads inside. And you can get this on the frequently asked questions part of my website. So the thing about this is you could say, oh, that really limits me because I have to fit this format. And you don't have to. If you count the pages in books, often it's fiddled a bit. And baby board books will be shorter, and books for older kids will be older. But if you're doing picture books, this is the most standard format. And I find it really inspiring, actually, because when you sort of get rid of the covers and the end papers, you realize it's not that much you have to put in there. And you can actually start writing the story right into the boxes. And then you don't have to worry about like trimming it down because it already is written to fit that format. And that's much easier in a way. It's a much easier way to just write the book to order. I find that very useful. And then as I illustrate it, I sort of drop in the pictures as I go, and it keeps track of how it's looking overall, because, you know, it might be sort of start with one color and move to a different color, or you might just kind of want to keep track of the pacing of your story, and seeing it all spread out like this is really helpful. So when I get these they call them thumbnails because they're small. When I get these done, I'll show you some artwork that I've done. I then sketch them out. So I do them at 110% size, just because if you make it exactly the same size, it tends to be, sometimes they need to just make it a little bit bigger and then it can look fuzzy. So I like to do it just slightly bigger than it will appear in the book. So that's the first page of one of the pages in Grumpy Corn. Or don't call me Grumpy Corn. I'll show you the original page. So that's the actual page in the book. You can see there. And lots of pattern, but here's the pencil artwork for that. And it's much simpler. It just gives me the kind of basics that I need to pin down so I can add the pattern later. And then the final artwork is, I'll show you that. Not everyone does it in actual artwork, but I do often. So that's the final actual picture, all painted up on watercolor paper. And I use 300-gram hot press paper because I just like the texture of it. And some people work digitally, but I got a bit tired. I did Jampires digitally with the lots of scanning, and I got really tired of looking at my computer screen all day. Just like, so I really enjoy having it all spread out in real art materials. And you know, it's just, you've got to do whatever works for you and whatever works best with your story. I'll show you another picture. This is Unicorn inside his space rocket because he decides he's going to be an astronaut in the second book. It was really easy. He went from, he wanted to be a fabulous writer, then he wanted to be a fabulous astronaut, and this could go on forever. So there he is in his cockpit of his rocket. And here's the final picture, which is, it was actually quite tricky because the disco light, like getting this in watercolor took ages, but I also really enjoyed painting that. And you can see, again, there's lots of pattern. And I like doing that. So yeah, so my tips are make books, lots of books. Set challenges for yourself, like Dave and I did with Jampires. Another challenge I've done is drawing trees, because life drawing is really important, but it's hard to find somebody to pose for you sometimes. But like a gnarled old tree will totally pose for you, and it won't even complain if you draw it like fat or thin or doesn't look like the tree. So trees are really good to just practice drawing. Also, if you go on Twitter, there's something called Studio Tea Break, and we set drawing challenges 4 days a week. So you could take part in that as well. It's at Studio Tea Break. And I kind of run that with Alison Diamond, another illustrator. So yeah, it's all about goals, like setting goals, and sometimes really manageable goals, like a very short, small book. Also, keep it quite simple. Like maybe it's something you just want to take 2 things and mash them up. So dinosaurs and firefighters, boom. Again, dinosaurs and police, mash them up. And there can be 2 quite serious things, but when you stick them together, it becomes funny. And kids really like a good laugh. There's a lot of serious books hitting the market right now. And I know there's a lot of issues out there that are very important, but little kids especially, you know, they need to laugh. Like if you're talking about, like, if you want to save the planet and you want people to value the animals on the planet, when they're about 3, you don't want to talk about the planet being under threat, because what can a 3-year-old do? It just frightens them. It makes them scared. So a better thing to do is teach them to love animals. And then when they're a little bit older, they'll want to save them because they know about them, or teach them about nature, because then when they find out about it later, they'll want to save it. But you know, you don't need to start with issue books when they're really, really young. Some of the best books are just really simple and make kids laugh. This is one of my favorites. It's by Nick Sherritt. He's an absolute genius. And it's called Ketchup on Your Cornflakes. And it says, do you like ketchup on your cornflakes? And then you can just put, do you like ketchup in your lemonade? Do you like ice cubes in your lemonade? Or do you like ice cubes in your bath? And kids think this is hilarious. Do you like milk in your bath? And a little kid can just play with this and be like, milk, bathtub. And I've noticed very young children, they just like to spot stuff. Like if you have a page and there's something serious going on, but you have like little birds hidden in it, the kid will just be sitting there going, bird, 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 and they love it. So yeah, feel free, like, be playful, keep a sense of humor. I think kids really, really appreciate that. And those are the books that they'll go back to and kind of discover, you know, and I think, yeah, I think we'd love to see more funny picture books. Another thing is also, you don't have to stick just to books. Like I had a little gap in my publishing schedule this year. And I was going to go to Nepal to work with some women there on some art stuff. but it fell through because of COVID. And so instead of trying to get a book and freaking out that I didn't have a book project, I started just painting. And I did these little pictures of mice in boats. And I just had so much fun painting a whole series of mice and ships. And it kind of expressed what I was feeling. Like I wanted to get out because we were in lockdown. And it's about voyaging and going to see, thinking about going to see my family. And I packaged them up. And I actually made quite a lot of money selling them on Big Cartel. See, here's a pack. So there was like little mouse. And this is all inspired by kind of manuscripts of like kind of the saints and stuff and their coracles and Irish saints and things. And there's a Chinese ship inspired. This was actually from a map. It was a detail on a map, and the illustrator just did, like, whoever illustrated like 600 years ago did not know how to draw ships, and it was hilarious. So I just copied that. Like the cannons are going up the side like that in a way that you never would with cannons, but I thought it was really cute. And there's a Viking ship. And this had nothing to do with books, but I had so much fun doing it that my co-author Philip Reeve was like, we should do something with this. So this is actually, you're going to see more of this if you're in publishing. It's not gone away. So a sort of a side project can easily turn into something much bigger. So don't be embarrassed if it doesn't necessarily like apply to your work. If it's something you love doing, just do it, and you'll never know. Stick with it, like on a theme that you really enjoy, and keep going. So I was wondering how much time is that? That's probably about the amount of time. I can open it up to questions. And I've got lots of stuff here, so feel free to ask about anything. I think Lola's probably gonna.
Thank you so much. That was wonderful. And I see that the wonderful, one of the hosts has already, written down a few pointers that people can take away. But I also wanted to reiterate some of the stuff that you mentioned. And one of them is valuing the early writings of your children. And another thing that struck me was when you said you edited a book 18 times, because I think some people feel that when you are writing for children and you kind of think, oh, it's quite easy, that there isn't as much work involved as there is with books that are written for adults. So what did that entail?
Actually, that's quite interesting, because it can really vary. Like with Vampires, that took 8 years in total to happen, which is insane. You can't make a living at that kind of work if it takes 8 years. But like, for example, I did a book called There's a Shark in the Bath, and that took me 1 hour to write. And it hardly changed from the first text. Sometimes you just get a burst of inspiration, you type it down, and sometimes that's one of your favorite texts because it just flows out naturally. And the pictures still took 6 months to paint, but the actual story, 1 hour. So 1 hour, 8 years. It can be a little hard to predict in this job, what's going to happen. But, and again, this was a ridiculous, making something ridiculous. There's a shark in the bath. I was inspired by my sister, who was scared of swimming pools because of sharks. she heard about Jaws.
And then you spoke a little more about this, and I'm going to open it up to the audience and to the people who are with us. But I also found something really interesting about your illustrations, and it's something that I learned when I was working with Francis Blake on my book Maya and the Masquerades. Children enjoy those little details. And what I found in Nigeria is that a lot of the books are extremely serious, so not much by way of kind of sense of humor, but also even the drawings are really stark. Whereas I was looking at the one you wrote with the narwhals, and you could see those tiny little things. Those are the parts of the page that children's eyes are drawn to. Do you want to tell us a little bit about some sort of experience you've had with that?
Yeah, I find that you have a main story going, but if you have like other little characters, for example, there's this crab that always pops up in all my books, not just my picture books, and he's never mentioned in the story, but he just like shows up and has his own little like things in the corner that he's doing, and it's kind of fun just to show, like, there all these sea creatures are arriving, and it's never mentioned. You can do all sorts of things in pictures that don't actually appear in the book or in this text. So like here's a blowfish and a frog, and they're putting on makeup, and like it's totally not even mentioned. But it's fun for kids to look at. So yeah, have fun with the details. Like illustrators, you don't have to just copy what the text says. You can indicate it, but also you can add something more, and make people laugh and have extra things going on. Like, anything that fits the mood. Obviously, if it's a book of like terrible tragedy and the writer wants it to be all sad, like you're not going to put somebody farting on the side. But if it's a book about like rude noises, then that might be kind of fun.
Why not? And the thing is also the way we write, and this is speaking from experience and my interactions with a lot of Nigerian writers. What I found is that they're always kind of looking for a moral of the story. So somebody's having a much more exciting time. So they're looking for a moral of the story. So when the story ends, it's always like, what did you learn? Don't steal, don't tell lies. It's always looking for a moral of the story and writing it in a very obvious way. But what you did, for instance, which I found interesting, is even after the unicorn asked the narwhal told the narwhal, I'm not going to write about you. You specifically wrote that the narwhal swam away kind of quietly, and still went on to go and sell this idea to the mermaid. And for me, that's how you teach children, rather than writing a story and at the end going, yes, so don't tell lies anymore and things like that. They kind of pick up those subtle hints. Did you do it on purpose?
Often I think like for example, that book Catch Up on My Cornflakes, that has nothing at all. That's literally just to make you laugh. Like there's no message in that book. But sometimes the message is just to be reading a book. Like kids learning the format of a book and turning pages and enjoying it sometimes is just as important as having a lesson, because kids don't always like to be taught all the time. They like to, it's more important to teach them, like give them a love of reading and to explore the world. Because a lot of children, they're quite sad. Like I remember when I was 10 and 11, I was so sad because all the kids would say things and I would take it really personally. And the fact I could just go to a book and dive into that world and be in a different place was so healing to me. It made me imagine places bigger than my own world, that I could, this is not everything. There's a world out there. There's a space to explore. There's the deserts of Arabia. There's all these things out there. And that is not a lesson, but I get that from the books. I think they're not teaching me something. It's just showing me there's a bigger world out there. And that gives me hope. And, I want to, when things are rough, I can think, yeah, but when I'm a grown up, I might go to the moon. So it's like that sense of hope. And, things do have a moral, like this, the shark in the bath. It's about cleaning the bathroom a little bit, but not really. It's like a joke about cleaning the bathroom. But, you could sort of, a mom could or a dad could say to their kid, have you just let 3 sharks go in this bathroom? And then it would lead to a funny way to talk about keeping the bathroom clean. So you don't always have to like bang on a moral message. I think sometimes it's important just to have fun.
I totally agree. So Tolu Shofule wants to know how long it took you to make Grumpy Corn, to write Grumpy Corn, and perhaps the illustrations as well.
Well, I think the story, I kind of typed it out on my phone, and that took about an hour maybe. And then thinking about it more, sort of, it just happened while I was doing other things. And then the illustration, like I worked with my editor to kind of make sure it was just right. And that took a couple meetings and rewriting, but not too much in that particular book. But the illustration took about 6 months because, this kind of stuff takes forever. Just to literally lay down the layers of paint. You can kind of rush writing, like you can take your portable laptop with you to a cafe and write, but it's harder to rush the pictures because you kind of need all your gear and to sit down and just make the pictures. But if you can come up with a quick style, you've got more money.
And somebody wants to know how you overcome the nervousness of thinking that your idea just isn't good enough.
Yeah, I don't know. This sounds really bad, but I'm American, and we're sort of taught to believe in ourselves. And I always hear about Brits who are like really just, I don't know. They kind of always punish themselves, and I don't really have that. I'm from Seattle, and in Seattle we kind of came up with like Amazon and Microsoft and Starbucks and all these businesses, and everyone's like an entrepreneur. And it's more just thinking, what can I do to get out there and make something? And it's more exciting than like, if I fail, it's just because I haven't tried hard enough. I got to try something else. And it's, you got to fail to succeed. So it's, yeah, I don't sort of punish myself for, sometimes I do a picture I don't like, and I think, oh, I got to try a bit harder next time. But I kind of don't have that complex of like, I'm a failure. The hardest thing I think was making the transition from being a writer illustrator to presenting my work. Like, they would put me on a stage in front of 500 7-year-olds and say, talk about your book for an hour. And I'd be like, or 5-year-olds, like 5-year-olds do not want to hear you talk about being an author for an hour. Like, they don't. And so you've got to kind of come up with a whole stage performance and like a variety act of drawing and ideas and reading and stuff. And that was a real trial by fire, and quite frightening at first. And I kind of wish in art college they'd had more like public speaking teaching. And I wish I'd learned more about public speaking and theatrical presentation, because I just didn't know what to do at first. And I learned like as I went. But I would see other illustrators literally petrified on a stage going, they're trying to like interview them for a radio show at the same time as being interviewed in front of an audience. And oh my goodness. So yeah, that's another tip, is practice presentation, public speaking. And you can even just practice by keeping a blog, because what you put in your blog is kind of how you present yourself to the world. And it gives you a better sense of who you are and what you're putting out there for everyone else. Because, you're not showing everything in your life. You're showing kind of the bit you want people to see of your life. And you need to sort of figure out who you are in a way. Like Dolly Parton said something like, you got to take who you are and make it bigger. So taking your essence of yourself and then making it bigger for the stage or for events. Because I was quite shy. I thought this is a job that I can just sit in my pajamas all day at home and nobody will ever see me. And it hasn't been like that at all. So yeah, that was quite hard, trying to believe in myself in the terms of presenting.
So you're saying that writers or aspiring authors you're basically saying, go ahead and just do it. Don't worry about, don't sweat, some of that stuff about, maybe I'm not going to get a publisher. Just produce the books, go out there. You know something, your situation is pretty unique, and that's the truth. And what makes you so unique is the fact that you're both the writer and the illustrator. And I've been thinking in my mind of who else in the whole of Nigeria that I can think of who does that. And it's probably one of our colleagues here who's on the board, Abdul Karim Baba Aminu. He's one person I know who not only writes, but he also paints. And I wanted to ask a quick question about when you're creating illustrations for kids, how do you process realism? How important is realism? What should you expect in if you're working with an illustrator, should you as a writer maybe impose some of your ideas in terms of the artistic style? How much input should you have?
I think it depends on the writer, because some writers have like an illustration background, or they have some sense of visuals, and they can be like, they can sort of bring that to it and be quite knowledgeable. But then you get writers who just have no sense of visual, and so they might say to an illustrator, but I pictured that person wearing like, a black hat. And you're like, but the red hat makes it stand out on the page. Can I please put a red hat on? And, it's a different thing, the picture element. And so sometimes a lot of, like when I did some of these books, like when Titus Took the Train, I didn't actually meet the writer until way after the book was published. And the editor kind of protected me in a way. And that sort of happened a bit with Morris the Mankiest Monster. I hardly met the writer at all. It was all about the editor working with me, because she was kind of protecting me from the writer being too pushy and putting their kind of 2 cents on it when distracting what I was trying to do. And the writer did have some input in this book, but sometimes the writer doesn't have much input. And sometimes I work with, like I do these books with Philip Reeve, like older sort of, we call them chapter books. And we work completely close together. Like he'll help me with the roughs and I'll help him with the writing. But he's got a background in illustration, so he knows like what, and sometimes he'll change the text to match my picture. Like I'll make a mistake and he'll just change the words. So it's really helpful. Like when you have a relationship with them, you can do more kind of give and take. But often an illustrator just has to illustrate what they're given.
Wonderful. And so we have a question from our illustrator that we all watched earlier on, and she wants to know if you work with multiple publishers and editors and how you manage those relationships. And I think linked to that is, can you take on more than one project at a time?
Yeah, that's a good question, because when I was doing this book, it's my first picture book in the UK, and I was doing comics as well for this publisher, David Fickling. And they said to me, "Oh, don't work for other publishers. You know, we'll give you all the work you can need." But they couldn't actually. They couldn't give me enough work to like pay the rent. So I did go to work with Scholastic as well. And so I would do one picture book for Scholastic for like the Bologna Book Fair in the spring, and then one picture book for David Fickling for the Frankfurt Book Fair in the autumn, and go between the two publishers. And then I started throwing a third book into the mix, which was the chapter book, because you don't really want two picture books at the same book fair, because you're actually competing with yourself. Like people might just want one Sarah McIntyre book to do it in translation. And if you're making them choose between your two books, you're kind of losing business. So this is a totally different format. It's not a picture book. It's a book with pictures, but not actual, much longer. So they don't compete with each other, and they can both sit at a fair. And so I did 2 picture books a year plus this book, which is 3 different publishers all in one year. And that was a little bit challenging, because you have to deal with all the different publicists for different things and different book like if I do a book festival, I might have to liaise with several publishers to get the transportation money and different PowerPoints sent along. It's kind of complicated, but it can work. And sometimes it's better not to have all your eggs in one basket.
Right, thank you. And somebody wants to know the story behind your wonderfully colorful attires.
Oh,
which is what attracted me to you in the first place when I met you at the Edinburgh Festival. I just kept thinking, somebody is wearing Ankara, which is what we call print.
Yeah.
See I was looking at your back and then you turned around and I saw that you were, just a lovely white lady. And I was thinking, how did that happen? Please tell me.
I live in Deptford in South London, and we have a very large Nigerian, Ghanaian population, Sierra Leone, and they have amazing. Actually, I collect I'll show you my fabric. I collect fabric, Ankara fabric. There you can see. I have it all stowed all over my studio, and there's these amazing like fabric shops like literally 3 minutes away from here, and I'll go like an art museum and I buy bolts of the fabric if I just like the pattern. And so you can actually see there's more there, quite a lot of fabric. And there's a great tailor named Esther Marfa, or Esther Blessed is her name, and she sews up kind of my bigger ball gowns. And this is from a lady at the market named Margaret. She's from Nigeria. she sold it to me.
You do wear some of them with really kind of big skirts, and ball gowns, you call them, right?
Yeah, they're massive, yeah.
Yeah.
The thing is, I'm a really big girl. I'm 6 feet tall and not thin. And so like they just fit me better. It's such a relief to find stuff that fits.
They look fantastic on you. So I have a question from one of the trustees, and she's kind of related to something that you talked about earlier. And she says, she's asking, when you illustrate for other writers, how do you balance any divergencies between your interpretation of a story, your preferred way of illustrating it, and what the writer wants? But you already told us that sometimes your agent or the editor kind of protects you from the author, right?
Yeah.
So give us like your worst case scenario in that kind of situation.
I think there's one book I did. I've got it here. It's I think it's a good book, but hold on, let me find it. It's here it is. It's called Super Kid. And when I got the text, it was about this little boy who like rescues everyone, and he's very virtuous and good and stuff. And I sort of thought it was okay, but I said to the publisher or the editor, would it be all right in the pictures if I do the exact opposite of what it says in the picture? Like instead of him saving something, he accidentally like totally destroys it, and it just gets more and more destructive in a really funny way. But he thinks he's like saving the world. And she's like, yeah, that's so funny. We should totally do that. And she agreed. But then she got pregnant and she left. And the next editor came in and she's like, no, we need to be, true to the text. And I was like, but I already signed the contract. I don't really want to do this book. And then she got pregnant and she left. And then the next editor was like, well, we're already like 3/4 of the way. You just got to do it. And I was like, okay. So I was really angry. I was like, but I kind of reverse snobbery. I'm like, I'm going to make this picture so good. It's going to be the most awesome book ever. And then she left, and the 4th editor was like, well, this is what we got. So yeah, I was actually quite proud of it. I did like I had a lot of fun doing like the broccoli monster. This is a very, very detailed broccoli monster. And these sharks in the book, they actually ended up turning into the shark book later because the editor liked these so much. She's like, you should totally do a book about sharks. So it actually did lead to things. And funnily enough, this is one of my best-selling books. It's by a writer who does Aliens Love Underpants, which is featured on television. So it like sold millions of copies. So this hasn't sold quite as many as that, but it's still done really well. So for all my like posturing and negativity, it was really good in the end. But it's also what started the Illustrator campaign, because they all said it's Claire Friedman's book. And I was like, no, I put so much effort into these pictures. I was going around the country like publicizing it. I'm like, we are both the creators of this book. So that was what started my campaign really in my head, to get illustrators recognized.
Thank you so much. Now, somebody wants to know, and this is, I think, coming from, again, an artistic perspective, how you decide on your actually, the style, the drawing style, the painting style, because a lot of your books, some of them are quite different as far as the style that you've employed goes.
Yeah.
How do you get to that point where you make that decision and say, this is how I'm going to do this one?
I think sometimes it's kind of dictated a little bit by the materials. Like when I do the chapter books, for example, I do the line in black ink, and then I scan it and I do all the color digitally. So you can see that's how it looks. And that gives a very flat, almost kind of retro look. And that's literally just because that's the easy way to do it in Photoshop. And whereas the watercolor looks I could not achieve this look in watercolor to get that flatness. So kind of the medium helps which medium I choose to paint with, really, if I choose paint or digital and sometimes the book.
How do you decide? How do you make that decision about what's going to work best for each book?
I think you have to look at the mood of the book. Like if the mood is sort of really lush or really jaggedy or sort of bright and cheerful, or it's kind of you basically, an illustrator, like an artist, it's about all expressing yourself, but an illustrator is not about you, it's about the story. And so you want to, what will express the story the best, even if it's not my usual way of working. And you kind of have to set yourself back a bit and just say, the story is the main thing. What works for this? Would it look better in soft pencil? Would it look better in flat digital? What would communicate it the best?
What would enhance it and kind of bring even the story to life? Yeah. So somebody's got a 13-year-old child who draws beautifully, and they want to know what to do to really encourage and guide him. And by the way, he totally loves your work.
Oh, thank you. I think just make sure you have a lot of good art materials around, whatever you can afford, get, good paper, good ink and pencils, good brushes. That can really help. They don't have to be the most expensive, but just so he has access to materials. And also, take him to art museums or show him books that are really beautiful, and let him try different styles, different ways of copying. Don't ever criticize a kid for copying stuff, because often you learn when you copy. If I copy a painting, it's not because I'm going to sell it, because that's illegal, but I might learn from copying the way that illustrator or artist, or even like an advert, it might be an advert on the side of a bus and you think, I love the way they drew that, I'm going to try to copy it. So yeah, encourage imitation and looking at things, and also keep the artwork in a nice folder or something. Don't just let it get rubbished. So like show that you care about it.
Yeah. That's what Shayo Ajetumobi, who's here, who's the illustrator that we're spotlighting, that's what she said in her video, that's actually how she learned. She started copying illustrations from children's books, and then developed the confidence to start doing her own. So it seems like that's really the way to go when it comes to illustrations. And one of the things that I'm concerned about sometimes in Nigeria is that it's the range. The ranges, we seem to be quite limited in the types of artwork, the different styles that we adopt when we're illustrating stories. What's the best way to really kind of expand your horizon? Is it just by looking at different books?
Yeah, I think look at books outside of like Nigeria. Look at books outside of the field, like maybe look at comics, look at art books, look at things like concept art in films. You get a lot of concept artists. That's totally different. Like kind of go outside of your regular sphere, and then you might find often the best things are kind of where two worlds meet. So like I was where comics and picture books met, and it was so all the comic-y stuff seemed really innovative to the picture book people, and the picture book stuff seemed really innovative to the comic people. So find two different worlds and kind of go find that gap there. So don't just go right into the middle of the children's book world in Nigeria. Like look outward. Oops, I think you're on mute.
Right. So the chair of ACAIN wants to know which is your favorite book and why.
Favorite book of all the books.
Child.
Of all the books in the world.
Of all the books that you've.
Oh, that I've done.
Yeah.
So it's usually the book that I'm like, when I'm working on a book, it's the next book after that. And I'm like, I really want to be working on that book. But I don't know. It's a tricky one. I think the second Grumpy Corn book, I really like, where did I put it? How I sort of push the patterns. Because I think pattern is a really thing I love. Like, with the fabric. And so you can sort of see that, like the pattern, that was very much influenced by Ankara fabric. You can sort of see the like batik look to it. And this, you can see here, like I really had fun playing with sort of different layouts. There's a lot of comics in this. That's a kind of comics layout. And then that was like trying to figure out how to draw fire in a really fun way. So I really enjoyed experimenting. And this was kind of very influenced by like 60s pop art, as well as Ankara, and like the combination of the two is just, it was really, I really enjoyed that look. So, and yeah, maybe this one. Don't call me Grumpy Corn, the second book.
And it's fun because it looks like you're drawing inspiration from different places and spaces and phases, and you're using all that inspiration in one book. If you've been inspired by Ankara fabric, and further on, later in the book, it's 60s pop art. So can you be that open-minded and dynamic if you're illustrating just this one single book?
Well, I think it's kind of like food. Like you can be really purist about food and be like, I only want to eat like French food from the 1920s. Or you can be like, I want to eat something that's French, but then I'm pulling in a bit of California and a bit of something I found in Japan and mixing it all up. And like, it's not pure, but it's more fun and interesting. It's a lot like cooking. So you're just putting in different ingredients and you think, it just needs a bit of that. So you add it into the broth.
No, that's, we do need to do as much as we can to develop help our illustrators develop and get more people involved. But I have to ask you if it's financially lucrative, and I'm only asking that because I'm Nigerian.
Oh, that's a really important question. It's probably the most important question. No, it's really hard. The first 10 years, I was earning so little. In fact, I didn't even pay tax my first 10 years, like first 6 years probably, because I earned so little. And that's a really, really big problem in books. I think I kind of started doing like comics, and that was sort of a side job, and doing evening classes while I did my kind of main job at working at the gallery. And like I kind of slipped into it. and joining the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators and meeting people at conferences. I couldn't even afford to go to the conferences. Like they gave me half price admission because they felt sorry for me.
Yeah.
And because I just like, my husband wasn't earning a lot. And I did have a husband, which really, really helped. So I feel for like single people, like there need to be kind of bursaries for people who don't have like background, you know, a family's money or a partner to help them. So I'm very grateful to like my husband for helping me. And it was lean 10 years. And then after that, I started picking up and I started making more money. But like for, it's kind of for Morris the Mankiest Monster, I was given, what is that one? That was the first one I did in Britain. And I got £5,000 for the advance, which I don't know how that translates to Nigerian money, which is, you know, it's not a lot for Britain, but
5 billion naira, that is.
Yeah, okay. So that was my first kind of serious money. And then so they paid me, I think like a third of it when I signed the contract. And then when I turned in all the artwork, they paid me another third. And then when the book was published, I got another third. So that's called an advance, and that's to like keep you going while you're doing the book. And oftentimes the illustrator will get a bigger advance on picture books than the writer, because the writer can do it quickly, but the illustrator, you know, they have to live for it 6 months on that money. So
is that how long it takes you, Sarah, on average? Is that how long it takes you on average, like to finish a book from beginning to end?
It's kind of hard to say because you can't just, I never get the chance just to like sit down and work on the book. I'm always doing like events and school stuff and everything, and it's all mixed up. So I can't really say how long it takes. It's more like what I can fit in a year and how many books can come out. It's really hard. Like there's just so many emails and invoices and all these like little things that you wouldn't think would come, and you agree to make a book and then you don't realize all this other stuff's going to happen, and you're like, how did I ever think I could finish this book? You end up pulling like late night working.
Yeah. And I guess somebody's asking, what's your preference and what would you recommend, traditional art or digital?
It totally depends on what you are confident in. I sort of started going more and more digital, but then personally I just didn't like it because it kind of made my head hurt by the end of the day, like staring at a screen. So I deliberately have pulled back to doing like analog, like painter art. But also I can sell it. I can sell the original versions, which that's all, I can keep all the money from that. So, and I was for this, but I was using this ink that isn't light fast. So it was like a problem because if people bought the picture, it would have faded. So I couldn't sell those. So now I'm using like proper watercolors that won't fade. So I can actually sell the original art.
And that's really good that you can actually, the illustrator can sell like the individual artwork, like for the individual pages. So once it's been scanned by the publisher,
then you get the artwork back. You always get the artwork back. Yeah.
You can sell them on eBay if you like.
Yeah, or however, yeah.
Well, that's amazing. That's really amazing.
It can be a little tricky because oftentimes it's not like you haven't deliberately meant for it to be a picture for a gallery because you've got left room for the text. So sometimes it doesn't quite work very well as a standalone picture because you don't never ever write the text on the picture when you're publishing. Never ever do that, because then if they want to change the text or if they're going to translate it to another language, they need to be able to take the words off. Yeah. So oftentimes there's this big hole in the artwork where the words are going to be. Oh, and you always need to leave extra room because the Germans words are a lot longer. So they're going to need more room than the English or other ones. So yeah, there's often a very big hole for where the text goes.
That's absolutely right. And I've had this conversation when you're even working with an illustrator. I mean, I became very conscious of that fact that the illustrator has to, from the start, talk about where the text is going to be on the page so that you remember how to use light colors there. You've got to think about all those things. Almost, it's part of the process.
Yeah. And that's a whole other technical thing in itself, because there are little tricks you can use to have like white text on black, but it's definitely a technical trick.
So how do you keep track of all your ideas? That's what somebody here wants.
I'm really struggling right now because I'm working on 3 different projects, and I've literally just set boxes out for each one, like to put that day's stuff in. So because I'm really not very good at multitasking on projects, and I'm trying to do a chapter book at the same time as I can't remember now. As a few other things. Oh yeah, and I'm painting pictures of bookshops, and that's like all these other things I'm doing, and it's so hard to just like keep caught up with each thing. So yeah, I really struggle with that actually. It's not an easy thing to do.
Are you ever going to employ a PA?
Actually, my husband, he's near retirement age. He's 60 now, and he's started doing 1 day a week with me now, because we finally realized that I was just gonna, because I'm American, so I have to file my American taxes and my British taxes, and that just took me so long, and all the invoicing. Like I didn't remember to invoice anyone until it was time to like do my taxes, and then I realized people hadn't paid me. And I was like, oh my gosh, I can't do this by myself. So finally, he's working 4 days a week in his regular job and helping me 1 day.
Oh, that's really lovely. And I'm just trying to see if I think I've taken all the questions. People have been very forthcoming, actually. And I want to say a massive, massive thank you to you, Sarah, for the time that you've spent with us. You've, as somebody has said here, Sarah is feeding us with some serious nuggets.
Oh.
Thank you so much, ACAIN, for this midweek event. It was truly worth it. Well, somebody has asked, you know how they just slip in one last question. How do you deal with writer's block?
Writer's block, set challenges for yourself. Just like say, okay, I'm just going to do like draw a tree every day, or I'm going to combine 2 animals in a picture every day or something. Set little challenges for yourself, and those may turn into something eventually.
I thought you were going to ask the person to go and learn from the unicorn.
Yeah, or go buy my book, Grumpy Corn. Exactly. Yeah, but Grumpy Corn's rubbish at it.
Didn't you hear when she was reading that one?
No, literally just start writing. That's my thing, and keep it short.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you so much. It's been brilliant.